Is indeed, and I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Fantastic. Madam President, esteemed judges, dear Maria Grech, distinguished participants, thank you. And I'll start with thanking the organizers for inviting me to address this conference. It's a true honor to join this panel, but also the other eminent experts that are present at this conference. We are discussing a very important topic, and the most recent events in South Africa with a new concerning variant, the closures in the United Kingdom, but not only there. I just heard on the German news that of tonight, flights from South Africa, Botswana, and a range of other African states will be restricted only to German travelers. So we're basically back to square. It will probably happen for some time. The issue of travel and tourism related problems and challenges will not evaporate within 2 minutes, that's for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, the danger of 10 minutes, and I was given 10 minutes and I hope I will make it, it might be a few minutes more, is that you start packing too many issues into the presentation. And you lose the focus of the presentation, you lose the audience in the end. And given that I just applied this morning as an IFTA member, I really hope that that doesn't happen, not that that is going to be held against me in the end with my application. So I want to concentrate on two things. The first is that I want to have a look at, and let me just quickly change this, it should come up, and I hope you can see this all. The first is that I'm going to have a look why mediation and arbitration, I think at least, are well suited for international travel and tourism disputes and challenges. And the second is, what challenges are there still out there in order to actually make this work as a system, and how to potentially minimize them. Now, let me start by the question of why I personally think that mediation and arbitration are well suited to resolving the international travel and tourism disputes. And I want to make 3 points here. The first point is actually a starting point in a way, because I want to have a look at the type of disputes that we're actually facing here, or what the traveler and the tourist faces. Now, there are low value, and we know that they're very high volume. But when we boil it even further down in an international setting, all of these disputes are ultimately complex multi-venue disputes. So when you litigate these in a national court, you will face very complex issues raised by these disputes, relating to forum, relating to applicable law, to proof of foreign law, enforcement of judicial decisions. This is owed to the territorial nature of the judicial systems, which are so closely guarded by the respective states. So when a litigant faces these situations, they also face many complex choices. It's a very expensive process they will have to go through. It's a comparatively slow process they have to go through, and it's only moderatively effective. Now, I say moderatively effective here for a reason. Of course, at the end will be a judgment. So in that sense, it is effective. But there is an enforcement element to it, and we know that enforcing a judicial decision across a border is still complicated and difficult and expensive. So clearly, this is not an efficient way to go about settling these disputes or resolving these disputes. For a traveler or tourist, there's time, there's money, and it's hugely uncertain of the outcome. But it's also problematic for states. It's expensive judicial time. And the allocation of resources to sort out small disputes at a high volume, like the understocked minibar that I came across, or the yodeling, the club of yodelers on a cruise ship, is that really something that needs to be resolved through litigation? It's public money that we spend on these things. Now, the Hague Conference worked on those issues. The Brazilian proposal at the time targeted many of those questions that I just raised. But there is an emerging agreement, and I think this also translated now very clearly into the realm of the Hague Conference, that judicial processes are probably not the desirable way. And that brings me to my second point. What are the alternatives? Now, the best alternatives for me are those where multi-jurisdictional nature of the dispute can be accommodated better. I'm focusing on two because I'm most familiar with those, and that's arbitration and mediation. Now, arbitration, we know it's well suited for multi-jurisdictional disputes. It's used every day all around the world in certain circumstances, at least, and I come to this in a minute. I want to make 2 points with respect to arbitration. First, the big advantage of it is that the procedure can be very tailored. So it's not a national court procedure that needs to cater for the minibar as well as the $500 million construction dispute, but it can be targeted very clearly to travel and tourism-related disputes, optimized for fast and efficient and effective delivery of justice. And the second thing that I want to say about arbitration is that it produces an award at the end, not a judgment, but an award at the end that is widely enforceable, freely circulatable under the New York Convention. So the enforcement mechanism is a much easier one than we see in court. But let me turn to the second one, mediation. Now, the strength of mediation, in my view, is that it's even less procedural heavy. The procedure regularly really unfolds during the mediation itself, and it's carefully managed by mediators. The mediator helps the parties to achieve a solution, and it is the party's solution to their dispute. This is a win-win scenario. It's not a zero-sum game by the end of the day. The process is interest-based, it's needs-based. It's not a legal process. The law is somewhere in the background, but it's really about the interests and the needs of the parties. And therefore, the process can handle emotions, cultural differences, power imbalances, and it can generate intangible solutions that are beyond the reach of any court. Think about the power of an apology. Now, this seems to me important to me because a lot of the travel disputes and tourism disputes are really at the core also about the disappointment to have had to deal with difficulties in a period of time where you should be lying on the beach and drinking a margarita. More so, the parties are in control of the process, and the parties are in control of the solution. They find their solution. We know it's a fast process, it's a cost-effective process. And even though I probably hear some of you saying like, hang on, but the mediated settlement agreement in the end is a contract and it can be breached. And I can tell you it does happen. And then you have to sue on the contract. But I also say it's a fairly rare occasion. We know from research that about 80% of mediated settlement agreements are actually complied with. And there are options to circumnavigate that problem. The parties can agree at the outset to actually convert the settlement agreement into an arbitral award, making the award enforceable all around the world. And in the future, we will have the Singapore Convention that was only in 2019 adopted by UNCITRAL. And this Singapore Convention will actually do what the New York Convention does for arbitral awards for mediated settlement agreements. And Brazil became a party to this convention only in June. I think it was on the 1st of June this year. The third point that I want to make is a very brief one. It's mediation and arbitration are easily supported by ODR. We've seen how courts were struggling at the beginning of the pandemic with ODR, with using video conferencing, including in my own country in Australia, but also in Germany, I saw it. Mediation and arbitration are using ODR for a very long period of time, whether it's for the preparation of mediations and arbitrations in an online environment, video conferencing, collaborative working in documents, etc., integrating artificial intelligence. I use transcription services in arbitrations that are artificial intelligence based, but it also would be possible to have decision preparation tools for specific issues in place. To me, these are really, really strong arguments in favor of using mediation and arbitration to resolve international travel and tourism disputes. But there are challenges, and I want to make canvas two aspects here. On the one hand, the challenges, and then I want to have a look what we can do about it. Now, with respect to arbitration, just very briefly, the perception here is, of course, that these are only for high-value disputes. It's heavily legalized, and it's often very lengthy also due to satellite disputes. It's an expensive process. But there's nothing that says that arbitration must be like that. Again, the procedures are so that it could very well be targeted to low-value disputes, that it is less legalized, and it does take not very long at all, and the expenses can be covered. Mediation has a slightly different problem. There is still a significant lack of knowledge and understanding out in the public of what that actually is. I have come across, sadly, many times in my career now that people said, oh, you do meditation. Oh, that's fantastic, to resolve a dispute by meditation. So you sit around in a circle, you listen to music and you talk about it. That's not what we do. It's a different process, but that's unfortunately still one of the perceptions out there. Another perception that is out there, it's a second-class type of justice. People say, I want my day in court. I do not get my rights when I go into a mediation, and that may be true. It's interest-based, it's not about rights. And they say it's not effective, so it will not work. So ultimately I must pay twice, once for the mediation, and then I have to go to court and pay again. So it remains underutilized, and especially in low-value disputes. And some jurisdictions actually remain quite ambivalent about it and put up barriers to certain types or mediation in certain areas of dispute. There also are some general in this space. I want to just point out two of them. First is fragmentation. There is a fragmentation at the international level of mediation and arbitration regime. There's many different arbitration and mediation providers, and they have different procedures. Now that has benefits for people who are used to that. So the big players, the law firms, etc., they know how to play that to their advantage and to their benefit. But it can have a dilatory effect on access to justice for people who do not use that system on a daily basis. So some concentration needs to be here. And there is a risk of overreach in regulation, and that always stifles usefulness of alternative dispute resolution process when these processes are to be regulated within an inch of their life. So what can we do about that? Now, not surprising, there is no silver bullet for that. It's a bundle of actions that is required. There is something about the visibility of the processes that needs to be addressed, explaining them properly, explaining their value. And there needs, as I just said before, a level of concentration of the system, an international dispute resolution mechanism, perhaps. Think something big, a travel and tourism appropriate dispute resolution framework. A light touch mechanism, not too complicated, accessible by choice, either by signing in a contract, an opt-in or an opt-out system, potentially coupled with incentives. But it needs to be optimized for fast, efficient, and the effective disposal of disputes. Think about a tiered process, first mediation, then arbitration, both bringing about a final and binding outcome, whether it's by contract or by award, happily dovetailing into the New York Convention and the Singapore Convention for enforcement ultimately. Think time restrictions for each step. There's nothing to say. You couldn't say you need to solve this in 30 days in the mediation. And if that doesn't work, it goes immediately to arbitration that follows 90 days arbitration. 120 days is the entire process long. Cost caps for mediators and arbitrators. No legal representation in mediation, perhaps. It's not a legal dispute. Self-representation in arbitrations. I've seen that before. It works. Co-mediation, having the nationals of the two respective states in the room is probably not a bad idea to bridge some cultural, some language barriers. And the development of ODR in mind with the framework would also work very well.
Tom.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
About to wrap up. Just a final comment about it. There are some tough questions. And one of the big tough questions is where this actually should be done. For me, the natural place is the UNWTO, a dispute resolution system very similar to what WIPO has done with WIPO ADR. IFTA, I think, could play a very significant role in establishing common standards in this space. For me, I agree with Professor Ginchard yesterday. The HCCH had its role to play in this. I think that role has gone. UNCITRAL has never been in the space in the first place, but I think both institutions would be very good as an advisory panel on private international law, legal cooperation, arbitration, ODR issues. I leave it here. It's about restoring trust in the travel and tourism industry, and a well-functioning mechanism that resolves disputes quickly, efficiently, effectively, and cheaply is key to that. And it sits squarely with SDG 16. Thank you.